Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Men for the Win is sponsored by the Grand Group with Edina Realty. Are you looking to purchase a new home in the Twin Cities area? Or perhaps you're trying to sell your current home? Whether you're upsizing or downsizing, the Grand Group with Edina Realty will meet all of your housing needs. Contact the Grand Group by emailing thegrand, G-R-A-N, group at edinarealty.com or call them by phone at 612-817-8751. The Grand Group with Edina Realty, 7-time Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine Super Agent Award winners. On this episode, David and Dan recap the Twins' 4-game series against the New York Yankees. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win. My name is David Kufis. With me, as always, is Dan Thompson. The Twins head to the Bronx against the mighty Yankees, and they take 2 of 4. Dan Thompson, can you believe it?
It felt really good to take the first 2. The other 2, David, I don't know. It left me wanting more. Is that much too hopeful in the grand scheme of things?
I think it's skewed because honestly, Dan, had they won the last 2 after losing the first 2, I think would be really hyped at this particular moment.
I think that's true because they won the first 2 in such interesting and fun fashion, and then they looked like they normally look in New York in the second 2.
Well, I mean, when you're playing against cheaters, Dan, it happens that way.
I'm sorry, but no neutral fan here watching these series can say that like the Yankees were clean. Right? We're going to talk about the stuff with Game 3. We're going to talk about Garrett Cole, who must be cheating as well. It's just discouraging. But here's the problem, David, and this is maybe a stat I did not expect. The Twins have the 24th most runs in the league with 63, but they have the second best ERA in the league at 2.60. Like, this is not the Twins team we're used to seeing.
That is correct, Dan.
So I think that's something we'll come back to, but ultimately the Twins are still a first-place team right now, but now they're 10-6 after splitting 4 in New York.
Well, there's a lot to talk about here, Dan. Let's go ahead and jump into the series recap.
Series recap.
Game 1, Dan. And I need to take a brief moment because there are times in life, Dan, where you just have a moment of bliss. And there was a moment, Dan, on this perfect spring day. It was like 82 degrees and sunny, but not humid. And I was eating dinner on a bench. And I was watching my kid play at the park, and I was listening to my Minnesota Twins baseball team, Dan, go up 11-0 against the Yankees. And there was a moment, Dan, truly, there was a moment where I thought I may have died.
Well, I was sitting at a soccer practice, and I checked my phone and saw that I think Hogs had mentioned a comment like decent start. And then I looked, and it was 7-0. And then they piled on more. Remarkable inning here for the Minnesota Twins, who win this one 11-2.
Yeah, so they put up 9 runs in the first, out of nowhere, really. Like nobody. If I had told you, Dan, you
my favorite phrase.
The Twins were going to put up 9 in the first, you would have laughed me off the podcast, but the offense just kept rolling.
They did, and Eddie Julien gets his first 2 major league hits in the first inning, which I heard a stat, I think it was right after that. He was actually like the 8th person to do that, which is one of those baseball stats that you think there can't have been 8 people whose first 2 major league hits came in the same inning. Like, that's so weird.
Right? And like, I want to know, how do they do that? Like, it's not just that you're like figuring out what the stats are. It's figuring out which stats you're trying to figure out. You know, like I don't even know how you cross-reference that.
I guess there's a big stats machine somewhere in a warehouse in California, right, that holds all of these stats. I mean, but like the tailoring of that search. Anyway, that's remarkable. The Twins, they go back to back to back with perhaps a couple unlikely people with Michael Taylor, Eddie Julien, and Carlos Correa, just when you thought the Twins might not be scoring enough runs. Right, because there's even a part of me that thought, I don't know, is 6 going to be enough?
As Twins fans, we're so conditioned when we're playing the Yankees that we will find a way to lose. Even up 11-0, Dan. We all thought it. And if you say you didn't, you are a liar, listener. If you are a listener out there and you are saying the Twins were up 11-0 in Yankee Stadium and you said, I know the Twins will win this, you are a liar, my friends.
Well, and Joe Ryan went out and backed it up. I'm going to talk more about him later, but 7 innings, 10 Ks. He does give up a home run, but he's 3-0 on the season. I don't think the Twins, I can't remember the last time the Twins had a 3-0 starter. And they have so many guys right now who just look so good starting baseball games.
Yeah, it was fun, too, to see the brief Twin, IKF, pitching in the 9th inning for the Yankees because the Twins were ahead by so much.
And that's Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, if nobody remembers who IKF was. What an interesting acronym he has. Yes, and he actually pitched a pretty clean inning. So I kind of wish the Twins could have tried somebody out, but could they not have? Was it not quite within the threshold? Do you need to be up by like 20 runs?
It's 10 runs is the threshold. So no, they couldn't have. And I do want to say, Yankee fans, they're terrible. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But one other note here, a lot of them stayed to the end, and this was about the only thing they had to cheer about in the entirety of the game, and so they were giving IKF a big old round of applause for pitching a clean inning. It was pretty funny, actually. IKF went to the umps to show him his hands to make sure he didn't have any sticky stuff on him after the inning was over.
Well, that's ironic, given what happened the next couple games. Well, let's go to game 2. I would argue the most exciting game from a baseball standpoint here. A come-from-behind win against the Yankees in the Bronx. David, 4-3? How does this happen?
I have no idea. And so Twins call up Louis Varland to make this spot start because they want to give Maeda an extra day of rest, and it'll also give an extra day to Malley. And I'm thinking, okay, first of all, this isn't even fair, right? Like, if you get that call at AAA and you're Louis Varland, don't you think, well, my shoulder's been acting up a little bit? And no, I'm sure he's excited to come pitch for the big league club. And, even if it be against the Yankees, one of the hardest competitors the Twins ever have to face, I'm sure he's excited. But my goodness, the win from an offensive side of the ball kind of takes away from the great start that Louis Varland had. 6 innings pitched, only 3 earned runs, 8 strikeouts. Again, he gave up 3 home runs, Dan, but I don't really care. 3 earned runs, if you go 6, is more than fine for me.
Well, you forget his first major league start last season was at New York on September 7th. So this was actually the second time he's opened a season at New York. And that game he pitched pretty well, 5 1/3, 3 hits, 2 runs, 7 strikeouts. So there's something about Louis Varland that just kind of works in New York City.
So did you notice who got the win in this one, Dan?
Well, so I noticed that Emilio Pagan did, which by the system that I think we've agreed on, this should have been a Louis Varland victory. Should it not have been?
Certainly. So we haven't even talked about that this season yet. So folks, if you're new to the show, I am a big proponent of not giving the wins and losses according to the current MLB guidelines, because I believe the win and the loss should go to the most important pitcher and the one who maybe caused the loss. In this instance, Varland didn't get the win, but he should have, because he was the most important to the win.
Absolutely, because he kept them in the game here and allowed the comeback to actually happen. Garlic, by the way, comes through with a home run here against lefties. Of course, taters and lefties, that's what he mashes. But then this was a game that Correa really won for the Twins.
Super exciting play. We'll actually talk about it a little bit later, but Correa comes to the plate, and he has Buxton on first, and he has Michael Taylor at second, and he hits a ball down the right field line. Buxton manages to score from first. That gives the Twins the 4-3 lead, which is how the game ended up.
And again, we just talked about Varland's start, but the bullpen coming through here too and keeping the game close with our buddy Emilio Pagan coming in, Jorge Lopez then with a hold, and then Duran coming in. He had a little bit of, it was a little dicey, but a smart play by Duran to let that ball go by him. There was a guy in first base.
Yes.
And then I don't know if he let it go by him, but it got by him. Correa gets it, steps on the bag, and makes the play. Another well-rounded game by Correa too, because his defense, he makes the spectacular look pretty routine.
Yeah, even today in game 4, there was a looper down the left field line that Miranda couldn't get to, and Correa was there. Now, granted, it didn't lead to an out, but Correa was right there where he needed to be to back up Miranda if Miranda couldn't make the play. Just, again, sort of speaks to his mentality of knowing the right place to be and the right plays to make.
Well, then, David, there's game 3, which there really wasn't actually a lot of baseball to talk about in this game. The Twins lose this game. They lose it 6-1, and it's not ever really particularly close. We'll have a lot to say about Domingo Germán and Rocco Baldelli, ever articulate in his rage, let me say. But we'll come back to that. Really, the Twins, they're 2 for 5 with runners in scoring position. They had some chances kind of later in the game. Actually, the first bad start. Can we call this a bad start out of Malley?
Yeah, it just didn't seem like he had it, even from the get-go. And the thing is, with the Twins pitchers so far this season, even if they've struggled out of the gate, one thing that's been so surprising is that they're able to work through those struggles and to pitch deeper into games. But it was clear Malley just didn't have it, and it was good that Rocco made the call when he did.
I think so too. Moran came in, he gave him an inning in 2/3. Alcala came in, wasn't great, and any comeback chance basically was given up with the fact that he gave up a couple runs in his 2 innings of work.
Yeah, so this one, it just never seemed close. Twins lose this one 6-1. We'll get to the drama. There's not much else to really talk about this. Let's just go right into game 4.
And again, in game 4, there's not a lot of drama here. I was thinking maybe Garrett Cole had some sticky stuff on him. He goes the whole distance, 9 innings, 2 hits, 1 walk, 10 strikeouts. Objectively, I mean, a great start. He is now the second Twins opponent to have a complete game. They are the only 2 complete games in the majors this season.
Would you rather have Lopez have made this start against a different Yankee pitcher? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You don't necessarily want your best pitcher to go against the opposing team's best pitcher. Like, you might as well just trade wins, right? If you put out
right.
your best pitcher against their worst pitcher and the like.
The thing is, though, you never quite know. The Twins played Cole last year and actually hit him around pretty well. So, you can make an argument that the Twins, if Lopez puts up this line, and if the Twins can just get one big hit, this is a very different game. You get to their bullpen. So I don't necessarily feel that way, especially because the Twins' starting pitching has been so good. I don't know that I would pick a guy to say, other than maybe Malley. I think right now Malley is kind of the weak link. I don't know that there's anybody you'd say, let's just throw him out there against the best other guy we can face.
Cole is obviously on another level this season. He's 4-0 with a .95 ERA. If the Twins were going to win this one would have been more surprising than any of the other games they played.
Agreed. And you know what? It's 2-0. The Twins still get the split in New York. And I guess at the end of the day, that's okay.
Well, we'll talk more about that with the grading, I'm sure, Dan.
Very excited about that. Let's go into our segments.
Catch 'em all, Kirby Puckett!
Puckett's Picks winner.
Oh, David. There was last time I was sad that Trevor Larnach had the all-time low for the season for me with -3 points. You blew that out of the water, David.
I'm trying a new thing. Like I said, I need to spot you and the listeners a couple of points here. So again, if you're new to the show, Puckett's Picks, we each pick a player we think is going to perform particularly well in the next season. I'm taking the golf approach, which is trying to get the lowest score possible. But the listeners took Correa, and he came away with the victory, scoring 12 points. Dan took Miranda, who had a respectable 7. And I took Byron Buxton, who has been struggling, to say the least, who has -7 on the series.
Pretty brutal. Ironic, of course, because Correa goes off the one time you don't take him, David.
I told you this would happen. So I have a rule, folks, that if Correa is available when it's my turn to pick, I will always take Correa, and Correa was not available because the listeners took him off the board, and of course it's the one time he goes off.
I feel pretty good about my 7. Like, I'm happy to have that. It's my second best score, and now this is maybe my favorite part now, David. The season points scored and the season wins. The listeners have 3 wins. I have 2. You have 0. And not only do you have 0, David, you have on the season through 5 series -5 points. What do you have to say for yourself here?
I'm getting ready to go. I'm getting ready to get it moving here. I don't know how many, I'm looking at how many wins I won by the last couple of seasons, and I'm trying to spot you guys a reasonable amount.
Well, thank you. I have 22 points. The listeners have 28. So good on the listeners here. And maybe they can, well, I don't want them to keep that streak going. I want to win. But as long as you don't win, this is the Hogue system, right? We're boxing you out, Koofus.
Okay, well, let's go on here. Beast versus bench.
Beast versus bench.
Is losing fun? Is losing fun?
So, David, I'm gonna go with a starting pitcher here, and I'm gonna go with Joe Ryan. And you are chuckling, but I think Joe Ryan's start in Game 1 was so important. I get that probably the Twins can win this game with a lesser start, with a Malley-esque start, right? But Joe Ryan going 7 innings, 3 hits, 1 earned run, no walks. Really, the blemish is just a home run, 10 strikeouts. I thought this was so important because the back end of the bullpen had been used in those last couple games in the previous series. So the fact that they could do that and then bring in Cole Sands, which in a perfectly Cole Sands moment to clean up with the last 2 innings in a game that's out of hand, just thought it was super important. And again, Joe Ryan with a 2.84 ERA, the Twins need him to continue to take that next step and certainly just not take a step back if they have aspirations to be a playoff team.
Yeah, I guess it's hard for me to pick out one particular pitcher in this instance to give the Beast moniker to, simply because Lopez did a great job, Dan. It wasn't like Lopez struggled and that's why the Twins lost the game. And the only reason why Sands really got to go in is because Ryan didn't have to do much because the Twins were up 11 runs.
I know, but to your earlier point, a Twins fan is never comfortable with a lead in the Bronx. And so Joe Ryan made it about as comfortable as one could hope.
Yes, I suppose that's true, sort of. Like, the offense needed to provide the runs. But I am with you. No, I am sort of being facetious a little bit here. I do think that Ryan is a good pick, and I do think that this game, knowing that he was in command and knowing he had to sit in the dugout for 28 minutes in the top of the first inning before he even threw 1 pitch in this game.
That's pretty crazy. Well, you have a good pick too. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I went with Carlos Correa, and the thing is, this is a tricky one to pick a position player on because the last 2 games of the series, nobody did anything, right? Like, some guys did bad things, but nobody nobody did anything really worth mentioning, but Correa went 4 for 16 on the series, but again, only the first 2 games count. I do have a quick note here. As I mentioned, Yankee fans, the absolute worst. And I understand Correa had a role in the cheating scandal with the Astros. However, when you have your pitcher throw a 95-mile-an-hour fastball head high at one of the opposing team's players and the fans cheer, oh my goodness, have a little bit of class, for crying out loud.
Yeah, not classy, especially with Kyle Farmer being on the injured list because of a play very similar to that. I think Cole was doing it more intentionally. You can't tell me that a guy of his caliber, kind of lost control of 3 pitches in a row. He knew what he was doing.
It certainly felt that way. Who do you have on your bench there, Dan?
I got to go with Byron Buxton. He had 10 strikeouts in the series. He had a couple nice hits early on when the Twins were doing that. Do we call it like Buxto for 4? Like, can we have something like that? It doesn't quite roll like the Sano for 4, so I guess that's probably not going to take. But he's mired in a bit of a slump. He probably would have had a 4th strikeout if Correa had not gotten the final out of the game.
Yeah, this was a rough series for Buxton. I do wonder how he's feeling from a health perspective, and maybe his timing is just that far off. But he took a couple of swings today, Dan, at pitches that were like, really? Really? This is what we're swinging at?
In order to be an elite player, he's going to have to avoid these streaks like this. I would suppose, but at the same time, I remember Kirby Puckett going through strings like this, and we venerate Kirby, so it could just be a bad spot. But I know I'm staying away from him with Puckett's picks until he can get himself a little bit more right here.
Yeah, so I think that's probably the correct pick, seeing as he scored -7, and I would have exercised my Dan Thompson school of thought and put Buxton on my bench, but I'm actually going to give it to Kepler. Kepler just did not perform well in this series. He was only in the last 2 games, like I said, but he went 0 for 6, 2 strikeouts, and he grounded into a double play in Game 3 that basically ruined the Twins' only shot to score some runs and make that game interesting. And he also had a missed play in Game 4. Now, you might argue that this was not a missed play. It ended up being a home run, and again, the Yankee Stadium is the only ballpark where LeMahieu's ball would have gone out, and it hit the top of the fence. So that means that ball in the shortest stadium in the shortest right field in all of baseball bounced off the top of the wall for a home run, and Kepler just misplayed it and ran smack into the wall. I just don't think he's right, Dan.
No, but he's also maybe not. He's so used to Target Field, which is a pretty unique right field. It's like he's forgotten to play baseball in another stadium. I hate that right field. I hate that short porch. I think it's silly. I think it's gimmicky. I'm tired of the stats that say, well, this would have been a home run in one ballpark, and it was a home run here in New York City. I just don't love that. But I agree with you. I think Kepler's just not looked right. Maybe he just needs to get a couple more games under his belt, and maybe he'll look better, in the next series against the Red Sox.
Let's keep moving, Dan. Rocco's Rewind.
Rocco's Rewind.
So I'm going to start us off, Dan, because your topic, I think, might take us a little bit of time to get through. But so I'm going to look at top 6 in a one-run game in Game 4 today. You have Michael A. Taylor on first. You have Julien put down a sacrifice bunt. Like, if you're going to take a risk here, have Taylor steal. Like, I hate the idea of bunting a guy over, especially when Julien, he's shown that he has plate discipline. He might be able to work a walk. There's going to be a couple of opportunities for Michael A. Taylor to steal here.
Well, a couple things. They actually didn't rule it a sacrifice bunt. They ruled it as just like an attempt to get a hit with a bunt. That doesn't necessarily change my critique of the play, because I would say you got to let Taylor try to steal there. And because to the point you made, and I think Gladden made the point on the radio too, was like, this is one of your only chances to score. Like, if you're going to score in this game, it's going to have to be because some things go your way. Taylor is a threat to steal, but the Twins have 1 stolen base this season with 3 attempts. Their league low is like, they're not bringing this into their game, which is weird to me, because I do think they have some guys capable of stealing bases.
They definitely have the speed to. I know that there are injury concerns, but there does come a point where the rules have changed in such a way that stealing becomes a much more viable option. And as we talked about in the preseason show, sooner or later, Rocco's going to have to start exercising those options.
Right, because I have no problem there if Michael Taylor gets thrown out, because you tried. I have no issue with that. And to your point, I think Julien is just as likely to get a hit in that situation as anybody. Well, let's talk about Game 3. The hubbub here that got Rocco so worked up. So let's paint the situation. So Domingo Germán for the Yankees was basically caught with too much rosin on his hands, too much sticky stuff that basically, when combined with sweat and stuff, which I think is weird to me that they allow anything. I know that it's because you want some grip where the gray area is so thick on these rules. The umps tell him to take it off, and then between innings, and then he comes back out for the next inning, and he still has some on his pinky, and the umps talk to him, but they basically allow him to stay in the game because he doesn't have enough sticky stuff on him. Very strange.
Yeah, it's a weird situation because I would say that any time that an umpire tells a pitcher that he needs to wash his hands, it becomes quite clear that this man has done something incorrect and against the rules. And so to be warned like that, to be told to wash your hands, to come back out and not have done what you were told to do by the umpire, according to the umpire standards. Now, maybe Herman did wash his hands and he just didn't wash them well enough. Whatever the situation may be, clearly the umpire wasn't happy with what had happened at that moment. But it didn't matter.
Sorry, I'm just picturing Domingo Herman like at the sink, like singing the alphabet song or something like that twice. Like, I don't know. Like, it's so weird.
It's odd. And I do wonder, like, assuming that it's rosin. Okay, that's what we're assuming also, that it's not a different foreign substance. The question is, even within that gray area, it seems pretty clear to me that if the umpire gives you a warning and then you do not heed that warning, you're done.
Well, that's the thing. Like, okay, so if I'm Herman, shouldn't I take that to say, I got to wash it all off and then go show the umps? And then maybe you can have a conversation and say, all right, can I put a little bit back on, like a normal amount? Like, you can't just go out there and keep a little bit on. It's like when you ask your kids to clean up the living room and then they like kind of just push everything to one corner. That's not cleaning up the living room.
That's how I do it when my wife asks me down.
Well, but then you should get kicked out, I guess, according to the... So the logic of what we're saying, there should be some punishment there, and he seems to have faced no punishment, and that was Rocco's problem, was that, you know, he comes out and basically the umps told him to do something, and he didn't do it, and then he gets to stay in the game anyway.
Yeah, well, it's confusing for a few different reasons, but like you said, the big thing is that there's this big gray area that there doesn't seem to be very much clarity on because it is, in fact, a gray area. They need clarification on these rules. I don't know how you're going to measure it exactly, right? Like, it's very subjective. But the other frustration that I have in this particular situation is that I'm not a stats guy as far as like the intricacies of pitching RPMs, right, and spin rate. But like everybody's talking about how his spin rate dropped, but nobody can really say for certain, oh, well, was it fatigue or was it because he didn't have as much sticky stuff on his hands? But if you look at his last start against the Guardian, that guy got rocked. And all of the Twins players said, according to the scouting reports that they had on him, the ball was coming out significantly different than they had expected it to. And I think it was Larnach or if it was Buxton, both were pretty candid in their remarks saying you can't hide it when you're doing something different to increase your spin rate like that.
And Josh Donaldson, who's now a Yankee, has been championing, you know, this anti-sticky stuff. I just think there needs to be more clarity on this rule. You can't have like you can kind of have some, there has to be a measurable way to look at this other than just like, well, enough or too much. That's not a rule. That's a guideline, and that just seems to cause all kinds of problems and all kinds of wiggle room. Then we're back to like running hands through pitchers' hair and things like this. That's just kind of ridiculous. Like, can we just do an all or nothing? Or I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but it cannot be so subjective.
Yeah, well, and we do need to point out Rocco did get tossed in this one, which is sort of funny, right? Because you would think the guy who was cheating should have been thrown. But Rocco gets ejected after arguing with the umpires about this. And I'll say, Rocco, you must have been doing some off-season training programs because your pointing and your hitting with your words was way closer. It wasn't great. It wasn't like perfect. Like, you're definitely not up to the major league level as far as anger and arm flailing is concerned, but you're probably like AA now. Like, you just need to work on your timing a bit and you'll be up at the majors in no time.
He spent like 8 minutes post-game answering questions about this, and I thought he was incredibly articulate right there too, and very candid, and just he even just said like, apparently he told his coaches, well, guys, if I'm going out there, I'm not coming back. You know, like he knew he was getting tossed from the moment he left the dugout. I kind of like that on principle. It didn't really jazz up the team enough to get a win, but Herman still had stuff on his hands. So it's going to cast this whole cloud over this series. And thankfully, we don't have to. Well, we do see the Yankees again in a couple weeks here. So we'll see if it's any different at Target Field.
Well, let's go on to Minnesota Moment.
Minnesota Moment.
I'll be brief here because game one feels so long ago. But those back-to-back home runs at the end of that first inning there, so cool that Eddie Julien gets a home run there. in that inning. And I think it's fun anytime the Twins can do that. And then it really felt like maybe the Twins might possibly win this game in New York City. And maybe this is a series they're going to end up winning.
It would have been great, right? Like, I think our joy would have been through the roof if the Twins managed to win this series. And I think our joy is pretty high as it is, even with the series split. And I said before the series even began that I would consider a split a win. And that will obviously be reflected in my grade. But I'm going to go with Correa's clutch hit in the top of the 8th of game 2, just because it was so unexpected for the Twins to come back in the Bronx and for there to be a clutch hit when it mattered. I couldn't get over it. Like, I had some buddies over, we had the game on, and I almost jumped out of my seat, Dan. Like, that's how I was like, how is this even happening?
It felt like some of those series the Twins played in New York, 15 years ago without the meltdown that came after the fact.
Yes.
And that was what was so exciting, is like to think, you know what, if nothing else, the Twins can go to New York potentially in a playoff series and say, hey, we know how to win in New York City. We're not intimidated by this anymore.
No, I do hope. I hate these cliche, like, curses broken situations. Remember Mike Zimmer with the whole, there's no blank curse, whatever. I don't buy into that too much. I think it's more of a mentality issue, but I do think the Twins, looking at their roster now, think, you know what? We should be able to win here. Like, yeah, it's difficult, but we can do it.
Yeah, I think this is a better Twins team overall than many of these other teams. Objectively, this is a good baseball team. They're having issues hitting right now, but they can pitch. And it's hard to take that away from a team. If you can pitch well, you're going to be in a lot of baseball games.
All right, well, let's go on to Mauer's musings, because speaking of not hitting well,
I just don't know how it can get any better.
Mauer's musings.
Okay, Dan. Kepler comes back. He was on my bench. He did not look good. He didn't look good before going on to the IL. He's returned now. But here's my question, Dan. Is Kepler just slow coming back, or could this be the end for Max Kepler? Could he go the way of the snowbird?
That is the thing, is there is precedent for this. Kepler and Sano kind of came up together. They're part of that core with Polanco, who is also not playing, though he's made some good progress at rehab. He played some back-to-back games now at Fort Myers. I think it's very possible this is the end for Max Kepler, because the Twins have other options now. They don't need to trot Kepler out there. Larnach seems pretty well ensconced in the outfield. They like Matt Wallner. At the same time, he could be slow coming back. Like, dealing with injuries is tricky. We've seen how guys have really struggled, especially he struggled last year with injury. He just never was quite right. But my heart wants to say, Max, I want you back. But
yeah, the outfield depth has sort of crumbled. That narrative is pretty much over now, because Michael A. Taylor has yet to sit, more or less. And Trevor Larnach is getting all sorts of starts. Now, granted, Larnach would be getting the starts anyway because of how well he's performed thus far. But sort of that right field, left field, if Gallo's on the IL, it sort of becomes a question mark. But now that Gallo's coming back from the IL, Dan, how much time are we going to see Kepler on the bench now?
I think maybe a little bit more. And dare we hope that Alex Kirilloff, who has also made a couple starts and is maybe making his way back to the majors. I would love the great story to be, too bad about Kepler's career. He just kind of ran his course, but that Alex Kirilloff could take that spot. That's the part I'm not so sure, because I'm not totally sold that Joey Gallo is going to be this. Well, I guess I picked him in my preseason to lead the team in home runs, so maybe I should be more on the Joey Gallo train right now. But I don't have a lot of faith that Max Kepler is going to bounce back and have a season where he's going to hit 20 home runs.
Well, and that sort of becomes the follow-up question, because if Gallo comes back, the only reason why I'm saying that he's going to be playing in the outfield instead of first base is because Solano has been playing so well, you can't keep him out of the lineup.
No, and at some point, Polanco is going to come back to this team. You're going to have to send somebody down. Like, there's going to hopefully be a scarcity of roster spots, and it seems difficult to justify giving one of those to Kepler right now.
All right, well, what do you have for your musing, Dan?
Well, so Eddie Julien was a guy that I think in our season opener, I kind of said, hey, maybe he could be the next Jose Miranda. And I wonder if he's going to follow the same arc as Jose Miranda did last year. So if you recall, Jose Miranda came up. He played pretty well, but not great. He wasn't awesome in the field. He went back to AAA for a month and a half, and then he came back up and he was fantastic. And so I'm wondering, is Eddie Julien kind of getting a taste here? Is he the guy that goes back down if Polanco can come back in a couple weeks? And then, are we getting ready for an Eddie Julien kind of second half surge if invariably somebody gets hurt and they need space for him?
Yeah, I'm curious what will happen in the next couple of weeks when Polanco does come back, because Nick Gordon has not seen a lot of playing time as of late, and part of that is because they want to give Julien those at-bats. And so I don't really know what the plan will be. I do think that your sort of prophecy here as far as how the rest of the season's going to go, I think that's very likely that Julien finds himself back at AAA unless he really starts to heat up here in the Boston series. He doesn't seem like he's quite ready, but he's dang close.
That's the thing, because if you have, like you mentioned, Solano, and Solano is kind of the weird wild card here. If your guy's hitting as well as him, you can't really keep him out of the lineup, but he plays kind of all these same positions as Polanco and Julien. There certainly isn't room for all three of them.
No, he's on an 11-game hitting streak. Did you know that?
So cool. And honestly, the Twins need him. He's one of the bright spots right now with, Correa's play recently, but with Buxton slumping, Larnach's not been, awesome the last couple games after his long hitting streak. They need somebody. It's just weird that it's him.
All right, well, let's go on to the series grades here, Dan.
Series grades.
I'm gonna go first because I want to get comfortable for yours here. I want to get a beverage. I want to kick my feet up. So I'm gonna give them a B. I think if this is against almost any other team, this is probably like a C+. But because it's the Yankees, because it's in New York, because of the way that they won Game 1, Dan, this has got to be a B. And again, I was tempted to give them an A-. And had Game 3 been a little bit closer, and again, it's sort of weird because Game 3 with all the cheating and whatnot that took place. But as far as this series is concerned, Dan, I think this is a solid B. And I would be happy if they had to go back to New York for a 4-game series later in this season and they took 2 games. I'd be just as happy then.
It's so satisfying, to hear you talking out of your heart.
Have you no joy in your life? Is there no song in your heart?
And to say something like, if it were against any other team, it'd be a C+, because David, the beauty of my rubric here is that it doesn't take the opponent into account, right? I landed, but here, it doesn't. I've landed on a C+, a 39 out of 50. So I'm going to run through them quickly. Batting was 6 out of 10 because the bats really were nothing after the first game. Fielding was 9 out of 10. Malley was his own worst enemy there with the only error in the series. Base running, 7 out of 10. There was nothing spectacular. They're not stealing bases at all when they need to be. Starting pitching, I thought a 9 out of 10 with Malley's outlier of 4 innings and 4 runs allowed. And then the back end on the relief pitching, I gave him an 8 out of 10. 3 earned runs in 7 innings. Isn't fantastic, but it also wasn't the reason that they lost any of those games. Okay. I did that pretty fast there. I thought that was a pretty quick rundown here, David.
Yeah, so you did a C+ is where we ended?
C+, and I think that feels right.
I tuned out there for a second.
It feels right, and I think that they would have earned a higher grade had they won more games because the play would have justified it, not the fact that they won another game. You know what I mean? Like the winning doesn't matter, David, with the grades. It's all about the quality of the play.
I don't exactly know what you mean, Dan.
This is going to be great all season. You grade with the heart. I grade with sheer statistics.
It's not, okay, real quick, just so people understand, this isn't just a sheer statistical formula that Dan's created. Dan is still providing the numbers for each of the categories that he uses to get his total. Like, Dan should make it, this is some objective standard. He's still choosing that they get 7 out of 10 for hitting and 9 out of 10 for bullpen. It's not like he's using some other math formula to give those grades.
Here's the thing. You could easily draw up a rubric for your heart as well, David, right? With like quality of opponent, like wins versus losses. Like, I bet you could do the same thing.
There is, Dan, no, those are two, that's, I don't even know who to compare you to in this instance that you would say, well, yeah, just draw up a rubric for your heart, Dan. What are you talking about?
I just say, people sometimes in relationships have like a, pluses and minuses chart, like in Friends, like when Ross and Rachel,
yes.
Like when Ross makes the list, like of everyone except they're not Rachel, right? Like that's the con, the pros and the con. Anyway, I just think it's possible, David. It's possible to boil down the heart to a number.
Please don't tell your wife that, Dan. Just keep that thought in your head. I think would be better in this situation.
All right, let's move on to Herbie's headline.
I don't know, Jack. It looked like Herbeck pulled him off the bag.
Herbie's headlines.
Well, it finally had to come to a close, Dan. The Tampa Bay Rays streak ends at 13 victories to start the season.
Which, unfortunately, was, that was the number already established. So they didn't set a new record. They just matched it, which doesn't make it all feel wasteful, but it does put it in context. It's really hard to win that many baseball games right out of the bat.
Yeah, it's pretty surprising. Now, granted, were they playing the Astros and the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Padres? No. Were they playing the Braves? No. Were they playing the Brewers? No. However, However, they still did it. That's a lot of baseball games to win. It's really impressive. We would be, Dan, if we were sitting here and the Twins were 13-1, I don't even know that we'd be meeting right now because we'd be so giddy we couldn't get our thoughts together.
I know. And the Rays offensively are just mashing the ball. Their OPS as a team is .897. They've got a league lead with 36 home runs, 112 RBI, which I guess, obviously gives them the lead in runs. I mean, but they're like miles ahead of everybody else. The next team in RBI is the Orioles with 84. I mean, just the way that they're mashing. They're also pitching too. Their ERA as a team, 2.54, which is ahead of the Twins. It's just they have played so well. They're 14-2 now, for the record.
Hang on. What's the Twins' current OPS?
Let's go back to that. The Twins' current OPS is 662, which is 28th. It's only better than the Royals and Tigers, just behind the Nationals and Athletics. So I guess that's a testament to just how well the Twins have pitched. They're 10-6, despite their bats not being there. And I guess maybe that's a sign of hope that they can turn this around and win this division with even middling offense.
With that, Dan, let's look forward to the upcoming Red Sox series for our Puckett's Picks.
And we'll see you tomorrow night.
Puckett's Picks.
Well, the listeners are going to take Correa off the board, which really isn't that shocking with the way that he has come alive.
I want to build a championship culture.
And so then you, I suppose, after your dismal Buxton, you get to pick here.
Oh, I do. Oh my goodness.
Are you stunned?
I kind of just assumed I'd always get to pick last. The ball always seemed to give me a bad bounce here, Dan, that even when I performed poorly, I would still have to pick last. Man, this is hard. I don't even know. Who's on the team right now? What? Gallo's coming back? Happy Joey? As we like to call him, just unaware Happy Joey Gallo about what's actually happening here. I am going to take Jose Miranda.
I am not throwing away my shot.
I think that he's going to continue putting positive points on the board. And I hate to say it, folks, but here's the thing. I'm going to start trying now. I'm going to start trying to win Puckett's Picks, and Jose Miranda is going to lead the charge to get me my first victory on the season.
This doesn't leave me with a lot of attractive options here. Why not? I've been picking different people all the time. I'm going to go with Donovan Solano, right? Ooh. He's on an 11-game hitting streak. It's a little bit of an outliner. I don't trust Byron Buxton right now. He could have a great series, but he also leads the team in strikeouts with 24 and 55 at-bats. That's like a Sano rate right now. So I'm just going to stick with Solano.
Okay, well, interesting. So now we have Correa, Miranda, and Solano for the upcoming series. I thought somebody might go with Larnach, maybe that he'd turn things around, but here we are for the upcoming Red Sox series.
Solano's one of the only guys without a home run yet here on this roster too. So maybe this is the one he'll hit it off the green monster, or over. Is over the word?
Over would be the way. Off the green monster, Dan. I think you just said that honestly so you could talk about Eddie Rosario's throw home off the wall.
It's funny you mentioned that because Eddie made a great play once, grabbing a ball off of the wall and then nailing a guy at home to secure a Twins victory.
Yeah, he also overran 4 bases in that game and got tagged out.
Doesn't matter. Remember that time, David, when we were sitting together watching the Twins and Eddie Rosario get picked up at second playing for the Guardians? That was fantastic.
Okay, enough, Dan.
Right.
It's your second show back. I still think you should send us out. You still got a little bit of capital to use up.
Sounds good. Folks, if you like what you hear, please tell a friend. You can follow us on Twitter at Min for the Win. You can find our Min for the Win Facebook page. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube so that you're notified when new episodes are available. And if you could leave us a rating, that would be great. If you'd like to support the show further, you can find us on Patreon. Thank you for listening, and as always, go Twins.
That'll wrap up another episode of Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, 2 avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, go Twins.